Hello and welcome to a new episode of Take More. Today we're looking at, let's start with the essential sewing basics. And that includes the mattress stitch. It's a completely hand-sewn stitch which allows you to, especially closing wall openings in such a way that afterwards, actually, if you do everything right, you see no difference compared to the sewing machine stitch. Also known as the ladder seam or ladder stitch, it's based on the principle of always moving from edge to edge, and it looks like a ladder until you pull it all tight. And when you pull it all tight, then the thread can also disappear and everything becomes invisible, making the third name, though probably not the last name, the nice stitch. Also mattress stitch, ladder stitch, magic stitch. Basically, it's all the same thing. What we need for this is definitely a pair of scissors. Ideally also an iron, because that way we can press our break edges really well and know exactly what we're working with. Use a pin if necessary, especially if you have very smooth fabric that is slippery. You can secure everything a bit more. Of course, we need fabric, needle and thread. I have chosen black thread now. However, I strongly recommend using a thread in a color that matches your fabric. So I would probably work with red or pink, but for demonstration purposes, I've chosen black. Another small tip in advance, when we sew this, we want to sew a stuffed animal or something else, so a turning opening, then we lock the seam at the beginning and end of our opening. Better, good. Because this ensures that nothing tears later and that we can work with a stable beginning and end. So what's missing? We need to think about it, yes. Whether we want to iron our fabric. I'll show you how I did it and then I'd say, let's meet up. See you next time. Everything is nicely ironed. Depending on how big the wall opening is, anyone who wants can both also fix the fabric pieces with a pin. So of course the place where you are not working right now, I think I'm coming like this and have of course also threaded the thread through my needle. I have it here now once. That should suffice in this case, and we'll tie a knot. And for that, I laid the end of my thread once over my needle point or half. Half is also fine. And wrap it around my needle maybe 4 to 5 times, depending on how thick the knot should be. Perhaps even one more time. 5 times doubled up is better and can now hold the whole thing. Pull the needle down over your own thread, and if I did everything right, then this should received forming knots. Perfect. By the way, I lost the thread. So to make sure I have enough to plant, the principle of our ladder mattress magic stitch, those are the two sides of the fabric. Both fabrics with their fold, and that we always work our way through the fracture, about 2 millimeters long, and then back into the other fabric fold, 2 millimeters, and always at a right angle, working our way forward here and from fold to fold. And we can tighten this whole thing every few stitches again and again, so that this way it all closes up nicely and we don't have to pull too much on the fabric. You can see here the 2 break edges align nicely and precisely. We work with those now. So I've threaded the needle now, so you can see it nicely. I've now gone down to the seam allowance with the needle. From one of the fabrics, we just need to decide where to start. One of the fabrics, and here, come out again at the break. right where my locking of the sewing machine seam starts. I've got a very, very sturdy material here, and I need to check that I can get through well. I will now provide some overview and stability here with my finger. And now we follow the principle of always lay at a right angle over our gap, and with our needle pierce there where the thread lies, and the thread, yes, guides us elegantly along our seam or shows us the way. So we stitch here just below the thread, and my mnemonic is simply that we dive under the thread and about 2 millimeters push far through the break. Depending on how firm the fabric is, it can sometimes be a bit more difficult, but that's what it looks like in the end. Now we're laying the thread again at a right angle over our fabric. Dive under the thread a few millimeters through the fabric fold, and in this case I always think so, and therefore, if anything, better to work a bit too far in than too far out. After all, we really want it all to disappear in the end. Now we go back again, and I dive again.
Subtitles by Stephanie Geiges.
Fania. So I've pulled a few times now. You can already see here my eyes didn't pay full attention, or rather my fingers. When I pull it now, it looks like a ladder. Then it should. Do I see everything? A bit better sealed. Especially when using a thread that matches the fabric. Does this all actually end with an invisible seam? Now it continues cheerfully. I'm pulling the thread over. And as you can see, the edge stays straight. You might see a tiny bit of thread here now, but as said, if it were a red thread, an orange thread, you'd see nothing at all. And so I work my way along this entire seam until we meet again. I've introduced the principle to you. I'd say see you in a bit. So I have reached the end of my dart opening, and with my needle no longer in the crack now, but in the seam. And that's right where my locking mechanism never has taken place. Now I obviously have to make a knot. So I go back a few millimeters in the seam and then forward again. So I'm diving in again and out again. And create a loop here through which I go once. And if everything goes according to plan, then I'll tighten it up right away. And to secure it, I like to do it a second time as well.
Every time.
Once more and through the shovel. Tighten up and the arbor is finished. Depending on whether you can get to the inside.
Do you have to drive it?
Valid
Cut here or here.
We could go back into the seam and out at some point. Well, if you stitch the cuddle tee, you'll find a way out here too, even if the whole thing is now stuffed and plump. So really out here, maybe try the knot a bit more too, to get deeper into the seam here. And that's the whole thing. Cut off
and into your...
Pull in the sewing project. So you can see everything clearly here. Yes, fine threads, a tiny bit of black mixed with the same color. If the color matches the fabric, it would be nearly invisible, and I hope this has definitely helped you already. It looks similar, of course, when you are in the process of a stuffed product, like a pillow or a teddy bear, something like that. And I can show you that again very briefly. With a stuffed product, the whole situation is essentially the same. Before I got here my neck pillow, my reading pillow, I ironed my edges after I stuffed it. So I ironed the whole thing anyway to get nice edges. Something I can use as a guide. And here you can also see my small ladder, and so that I can pull everything nicely together and not have to work all the way to the tip, even though it's stuffed. If you want to know how to sew something like this, then definitely check back into this channel next time. I'll be recording the whole thing for you. And until then, feel free to comment below, leave a like or subscribe. Tell me what you want to see in the future. And until then, I wish you lots of success with the mattress/ladder/magic stitch, and all the best until next time.